Resistance largely quelled, Edward I swiftly solidified his conquest, making Wales part of the English kingdom. England's war struggles aren't done yet. From 1337 to 1453, the 100-Year War began with England and France. The everlasting conflict weakened both empires and kept England tied to their tiny island. Right after the 100 Years' War, England was amid another war. This time, it was between the House of Lancaster and the House of York, in the infamous War of the Roses from 1455 to 1487. The Lancastrians won, and King Henry VI was declared king. The rest of the world was starting to open up. Christopher Columbus sailed the ocean blue in 1492 and landed in the Bahamas. After his initial landing, Columbus explored several other islands in the Caribbean, including Cuba and Hispaniola, now shared between the Dominican Republic and Haiti. He also explored the coasts of present-day Central and South America, including Venezuela and Panama. This discovery of a massive landmass led the British government to desire land on this new continent. When Italian Giovanni Caboto sought support from King Henry VII to explore this new continent and find a direct route to Asia, King Henry was intrigued and granted Caboto a patent, which authorized him to explore and claim any lands he might discover for the English crown. Giovanni changed his name to John Cabot, and he was ready to go. In May 1497, Cabot set sail from Bristol, England, in hopes to find a passageway to Asia. He led a crew of about 18 men aboard a small ship called the Matthew. Their journey across the Atlantic was challenging, as they faced treacherous weather conditions and unknown dangers. After several weeks at sea, on June 24, 1497, Cabot and his crew finally spotted land. They had arrived somewhere along the eastern coast of North America, in an area later named Newfoundland, as it was newfound land. Cabot and his crew were greeted by an unfamiliar landscape and encountered indigenous peoples, likely the Beothuk or Mi'kmaq, who had lived in the region for thousands of years. Cabot claimed the land for England, planting the English flag on the shore and taking possession of the newly discovered territory. The exact duration of Cabot's stay in the New World is uncertain, but it is believed that he explored the coastline briefly before returning to England, arriving back in Bristol in August 1497, where he was celebrated as a hero for his achievements. Cabot's discovery spread quickly throughout Europe, generating great excitement and interest. His successful voyage provided the English with hope of finding a western route to Asia and competing with other European powers in the lucrative trade markets of the East. Encouraged by his success, Cabot made a second voyage in 1498, possibly intending to explore further and solidify England's claim to the newfound lands. However, the details of this expedition are lost to history. Some reports suggest that the voyage was successful, while others claim it ended in disaster, with Cabot and his crew lost at sea. While back in England, King Henry VIII was married to his first wife, Catherine of Aragon. During their beginning years of marriage, everything was going fine. Like any king at the time, he was forced to be loyal to the Catholic Church and yearned for a strong and legitimate heir to secure his dynasty. However, Henry's heart grew heavy with a troubling dilemma as the years passed. His marriage to Catherine of Aragon had only yielded a single surviving child, Princess Mary. The king's desperate desire for a male heir began to consume him, and he became increasingly convinced that his marriage was invalid in the eyes of God. Turning to the Pope for a solution, Henry beseeched the Holy See to grant him an annulment of his marriage to Catherine. He argued that the marriage was unlawful, for Karen had previously been married to his older brother Arthur, who had passed away. According to the Old Testament, marrying one's brother's widow was strictly forbidden, and Henry believed this was why he lacked a male heir. However, fate had other plans. The Pope, influenced by Catherine's powerful nephew, Emperor Charles V of Spain, refused to grant the annulment. Frustration and desperation gripped the king's heart, and he made a momentous decision. In a bold and unprecedented move, Henry VIII decided to break away from the Roman Catholic Church and establish his own church within England. So, in 1534, the English Parliament passed the Act of Supremacy, formally severing England's ties to the papacy and officially creating the Church of England. With King Henry VIII to be its spiritual leader, an Anglicism was born. After King Henry divorced and beheaded his other wives, his daughter from Catherine, Mary I, became queen. and was nicknamed Bloody Mary through her killing spree to re-establish Catholicism. But her reign was short-lived, as her half-sister Elizabeth I would soon take over and redeclare England to be a Protestant state. Elizabeth passed the Act of Supremacy in 1559, which made Elizabeth Supreme Governor of the Church of England. She also passed the Act of Uniformity, establishing the Book of Common Prayer as the official liturgy. However, outside of England, the race for colonization has already begun. Under King Philip, the Spanish established colonies across the South American continent. The Spanish were expanding their wealth, from the former capital of the Aztec, Tenochtitlan, to Machu Picchu in Peru, and the Andes Mountains in Chile. Along the Brazilian coast, the Portuguese had several settlements, like São Vicente, Pernambuco, and Rio de Janeiro. The French established northern colonies in Quebec, and some small territories in Florida called Fort Caroline. The race for overseas land was on. So, Queen Elizabeth commissioned an army of seafarers to discover this planet. The group, colloquially known as the Sea Dogs, was given legal access to pillage and loot all Spanish ships they saw, with the hopes of creating British dominance on the global stage. One of her first appointees was John Hawkins, a pardoned killer who saved his life by joining the Royal Navy. In 1561, Hawkins made a voyage down to the Canary Islands, a Spanish island colony off the coast of Africa. Hawkins saw a process that would make him wealthy and hurt human beings. He learned about how to capture and sell people into slavery. With his new knowledge, in 1562, Hawkins set sail, traveling along the African coast to Sierra Leone, where he captured 300 Africans and trapped them in their ship. From there, he sailed to the Caribbean. He did not have permission from either Spain or Portugal to trade with their colonies, so he sold his enslaved people in Isabela, Puerto de Plata, and Monte Cristi, places where the local authorities did not enforce government trade embargoes. The enslaved people were traded for pearls, hides, and sugar. The trade was so prosperous that when he returned to England, he was knighted and to be called Sir. In October 1564, Hawkins went on another voyage back to Sierra Leone. He took over 400 enslaved people from Africa. Some he bought from the Portuguese, others he kidnapped directly by raiding the coast. He left Africa on January 29, 1565. On April 3, 1565, Hawkins arrived at Borborada in Venezuela. As trade was prohibited, he carried out a fake threat of force with the local governor's collusion. He then traveled to Rio de la Hacha, where he used power to ensure the deals he thought were fair. He sold 300 enslaved people. He was paid in gold, silver, and other precious items, and took further orders to trade enslaved people on a future voyage. His third slave voyage wasn't as easy as the first two. When he arrived on the African coast, he could not gather any enslaved people because of a Portuguese embargo. He attempted to capture and kidnap the inhabitants of a village near Cape Verde, but he was wounded and had to retreat. Hawkins recruited a local king in Sierra Leone to help him forcibly kidnap people, capturing over 500 people. On February 7, 1568, he set sail across the Atlantic Ocean to sell these people. He sold some of his captives in Margarita Province and others in Borborada. At Rio de la Hacha, the governor refused him permission to trade, so Hawkins and his assistant Francis Drake shot at his house, and they took over the town before selling the enslaved people. On his retreat, though, the voyage ran into the Spanish port of San Juan de Ulua because of a storm. The Spanish cannons roared to life in the middle of peace talks, sending cannonballs hurtling through the air towards the English ships. Though outnumbered, Hawkins' fleet maneuvered skillfully, evading the deadly projectiles and returning fire with cannons. The battle raged on, and the English sailors fought with fierce determination. However, amid the chaos, Hawkins and his men had a choice: retreat or spend the rest of their lives in a Spanish galley. 114 men became prisoners, while Hawkins and 15 others returned to England and made a handsome profit. Regardless of the morals, slavery was a lucrative business, and the English would do anything to protect it. That's when, in 1577, she sent Francis Drake to find a new trade passage to Asia. Unlike previous explorers, Drake knew of the existence of America and wanted to find a way around the massive landmass so they could reach the lands of Asia. Drake's first destination was around Cape Horn, the southern tip of South America. The fierce winds roared and the waves towered like mountains. Testing the crew's resolve and camaraderie, but Drake's steady leadership and unwavering determination carried them through, and they emerged from the Strait of Magellan into the boundless Pacific Ocean. The world was their oyster as they sailed northward along the western coast of South America. The landscapes were a tapestry of untamed beauty,